A woman in a cheap business suit slammed a penalty notice on my doorstep. $100,000 for infractions I'd never heard of. Smirking, she had no clue she had just tangled with the wrong homeowner. You see, I'm not just another resident. I own half the properties in this neighborhood, including hers. It all began when I moved into what I assumed would be a serene, upscale neighborhood. I'd spent years building my real estate empire, flipping properties, investing in commercial and residential real estate, and quietly accumulating a fortune. My goal was never to be flashy or brag about my achievements. In fact, I enjoyed living discreetly. I selected this neighborhood precisely because it was supposed to be peaceful, sophisticated, and free of chaos. That was my first miscalculation. The moment I finalized the purchase, I sensed something odd. I had barely parked my vehicle in the driveway when an older woman in a jacket marched up, clipboard in hand. Her expression was severe, as if she were about to scold a child for misbehaving. "Excuse me, you're the new homeowner?" she inquired, her tone firm. I nodded. "Yeah, that's me." She pursed her lips, giving me a once-over like I was some stray animal that had wandered onto her immaculate property. "I'm Karen Thompson, president of the Homeowner Association. We have regulations here. I suggest you read through the manual carefully. You'll find everything you need to know about maintaining compliance." I wasn't bothered. I had lived in homeowner association communities before. Some were reasonable. Others were power-hungry nightmares. I wasn't sure where this one stood yet, but I had a gut feeling it wasn't going to be easy. A week passed, and I received my first warning. A notice about my driveway apparently. My concrete was too bright in shade, violating the neighborhood's consistency standards. I chuckled. Surely this was a joke. But then another notice arrived. This time I was fined $500 for my garbage bins being visible from the road. I had barely settled, and the violations were stacking up like an ambush. I decided to do a little investigation. Speaking to a few neighbors, I quickly learned Karen was a dictator. She ran the homeowner association like her personal regime, imposing ridiculous fines on residents for minor infractions. Several homeowners had been forced to pay thousands in fraudulent penalties, some even losing their homes due to foreclosure when they couldn't keep up. "She's been doing this for years," one elderly neighbor murmured. To me, I wanted to sell my house, but she blocked my listing, claiming I hadn't pre-approved the color of my shutters with the homeowner association. I had to pay thousands just to be allowed to sell my own property. The more I heard, the more disgusted I became. It was clear Karen wasn't just a meddler enforcing policies. She was running a full-blown extortion operation. Then the shocking moment arrived. A thick envelope appeared in my mailbox marked urgent. Inside was an official-looking document from the Homeowner Association, outlining a series of violations I had supposedly committed. The total penalty $100. 000. I blinked. That had to be an error. I flipped through the pages, scanning the list. My grass was too lush. My windows reflected excessive sunlight. My mailbox was not compliant. It was ridiculous. It was theft. I stormed over to the Homeowner Association office located inside the neighborhood clubhouse. Karen sat behind a desk, lazily skimming through a magazine. When she saw me, she smirked. "Ah, Mr. Carter," she said, faking politeness. "I assume you're here about your infractions." I dropped the papers on her desk. "You think I'm going to pay this absurdity?" She raised an eyebrow. "If you don't, we'll place a lien on your property. You wouldn't be the first." I narrowed my eyes. "You're seriously trying to swindle me for 100 grand? Karen leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "It's not blackmail. It's the regulations. If you don't like it, you're free to relocate." I smiled. "You really have no understanding of who I am, do you?" She scoffed. "I don't care who you are. The Homeowner Association has complete jurisdiction here." I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I simply turned around and walked out. She thought she had won. She thought she had another target trapped in her control. She had no idea she had just initiated a battle with the wrong man. Because what Karen didn't know, what no one in the neighborhood knew, was that I wasn't just some random property owner. I was a billionaire real estate magnate. And while she thought she was holding all the influence, I was about to overturn the entire game on her. I didn't react instantly. Karen expected me to resist her right then and there, to plead or dispute, to yield under her so-called authority. But I had played greater games than this. I wasn't just going to defeat her, I was going to demolish her entire control. I started with the essentials. If a homeowner association is fraudulent, there's always a financial record. These operations don't function on Karen's intimidation alone. They need deceptive transactions, concealed funds, and a network of corrupt board members. The first step: engaging with the neighbors. I took a relaxed approach, knocking on doors and striking up discussions. Most residents were hesitant at first. Karen had built a culture of intimidation. But once I made it clear that I wasn't just another property owner, but someone determined to fight, the story started surfacing. I paid almost $155,000 in penalties last year, an elderly man named Mr. Dawson said. And I never saw a single enhancement in the neighborhood, just more restrictions. She dominates everything, a younger couple added. She rejected our fence 3 times, saying the material was too rugged. Then she approved the exact same fence for her friend down the street. One woman even murmured, "People who resist end up with unexpected infractions. And if you refuse to pay repossession, she takes their properties." That caught my attention. I needed proof. Luckily, I had an advantage. While Karen saw me as just another clueless resident, I had vast real estate networks, including access to property transactions, financial documents, and legal analysts who could help me track the homeowner association's cash flow. Within 48 hours, I had a comprehensive report in my hands, and what I uncovered was beyond anything I expected. The homeowner association was a complete extortion scheme. Karen and her board had been redirecting penalties into private accounts under the pretense of community enhancements. They claimed funds were going to landscaping, clubhouse remodeling, and security upgrades, but none of those services actually existed. In reality, most of the neighborhood's so-called projects had been financed on paper only. The money never left Karen's controlled accounts, and the foreclosures even worse. Karen had personally seized 4 properties in the last 2 years, houses she had forced into repossession with excessive violations. Then, like clockwork, those houses were mysteriously sold at below market value to firms owned by her relatives and associates. I had enough evidence to annihilate her, but I wasn't just going to expose her, I was going to take everything from her, flipping the power. First, I made some calculated property investments using shell corporations. I quietly started purchasing properties in the neighborhood from residents desperate to escape Karen's grasp. By the end of the week, I had secured over 40% of the homes in the homeowner association. Second, I investigated further into the homeowner association board. Most of them were nothing more than Karen's loyal followers, but a couple of them were weak spots. Individuals who weren't as entangled in the corruption, but had complied out of intimidation or financial gain. Approached one of them, Ted, the homeowner association treasurer. He was a nervous wreck when I met him at a local cafe. I didn't know how deep it ran, he stammered when I confronted him with the financial inconsistencies. Karen was forceful, but I didn't realize she was actually embezzling. She's about to collapse, I told him. The only question is whether you collapse with her. Ted swallowed hard. Then in a trembling voice he muttered, "What do you need me to do?" Excellent. With Ted switching sides and my property acquisitions increasing, I was no longer just a homeowner challenging a homeowner association. I was an owner with influence. I knew Karen wouldn't anticipate it, so I let her assume she was still in charge. That's when I got another penalty notice, this time for $25,000. Apparently my front door was the incorrect shade of beige. I smirked as I read the letter. Karen believed she was playing a game. She had no idea she was about to lose everything. The moment I received the new penalty notice, I knew Karen was escalating. She wasn't just targeting me, she was attempting to crush me. But I wasn't some naive homeowner she could intimidate into submission. I was about to strike back with force. Instead of retaliating instantly, I let her believe she was still in command. I went about my routine as usual, giving no hint that I was setting up her collapse. While she grinned behind her homeowner association desk, fantasizing about my inevitable defeat, I was making tactical moves behind the scenes. Karen's ultimatum. A few days later, Karen decided to confront me directly. She strutted up my driveway, smug as ever, and handed me another thick envelope. "You're officially in breach of multiple homeowner association regulations," she said, barely containing her excitement. "If you don't settle the fines within 30 days, we'll be forced to place a lien on your home. And if you don't rectify the violations after that, well." She gave a fake sympathetic shrug. "Foreclosure is always an option." I raised an eyebrow. "Foreclosure over a front door? It's not just the door," she snapped. "It's your landscaping, your mailbox, your window coverings, everything." I folded my arms and gave her a long stare. "You really have no idea who I am, do you?" She scoffed. "I don't care who you are. The homeowner association has absolute control here. You signed the agreement when you moved in?" I smiled. "Good to know." Then I handed her a thick envelope of my own. She took it, perplexed, and opened it. Her face turned ghostly pale. As she examined the document, This is an eviction notice," she stammered. I nodded. "That's correct. You've been residing here rent-free for years, obtaining foreclosed homes through homeowner association deception. But the issue is you don't actually own your house anymore." She looked up, panic spreading across her face. "I do," I said nonchalantly. "Homeowner association board meeting." Ambush. Karen didn't believe me at first, but she quickly understood I was completely serious. I had been purchasing properties in the neighborhood for weeks, obtaining just enough to hold majority voting power in the homeowner association. I wasn't just some homeowner battling the board, I owned the board, and I was about to wield that power against her. I called for an emergency homeowner association meeting, something only a majority property owner could authorize. Karen arrived with her usual arrogance, flanked by the other dishonest board members, expecting to silence me. She even had a smirk on her face when she sat down at the head of the table. But the moment I opened my folder and began exposing her offenses, that smirk disappeared. Dropping the first revelation, I started with the financial inconsistencies. According to homeowner association records, I said, residents have been paying thousands in penalties every year. Yet there's no legitimate record of where the money has gone. I pulled out bank statements showing transfers into private accounts linked to Karen and her board members. "You've been embezzling from the community," I continued, sliding the proof toward the other board members. A few of them swallowed hard. Karen's face turned crimson. "This is absurd," she spat. "You're not a lawyer. You don't have the jurisdiction to inspect homeowner association finances." I leaned back. "Oh, but I do, because I own 40% of the properties in this neighborhood." The room went completely silent. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish struggling for air. "You're lying," she finally muttered. I smiled. "Would you like to review the purchase records?" I slid another folder across the table. Karen snatched it up, flipping through the pages with trembling fingers. Every home I had obtained, every title transfer. She wasn't dealing with a desperate homeowner anymore. She was facing a real estate tycoon who had just legally seized control of her entire territory. Karen's arrogance began to shatter. At this point, the other board members started turning against her. Ted, the homeowner association treasurer I had convinced earlier, cleared his throat. I didn't know about the financial fraud," he said anxiously. Karen shot him a deadly glare. "Stay quiet, Ted." But Ted was finished shielding her. "If this is legitimate, we could be in severe legal trouble." That's when I unveiled the second revelation. I pulled out my phone, pressed play, and a recording of Ted's confession echoed through the room. "Karen's been running this place like an autocracy." Past Ted's voice said she forces people into foreclosure. Then her associates buy the properties cheap. "It's a scam, man." I didn't know how deep it went, but she manipulates everything. Karen lunged across the table, attempting to grab my phone. "You can't record that. That's unlawful," she shrieked. I yanked my hand back before she could touch me. "Actually, in this state, It's entirely legal to record a conversation as long as one participant agrees. And well, I agreed. She turned to the rest of the board. Are you all just going to remain silent? Do something. But they were finished. The homeowner association vice president, a reserved man who had evidently been waiting for a chance to free himself from her control, spoke up. I vote to remove Karen as homeowner association president. The decision was unanimous. Karen screeched in fury. You can't do this. I created this homeowner association. You can't. I cut her off. Karen, it's over. She turned to me, pure hostility in her eyes. You think this is finished? She hissed. You have no idea who you're challenging. I smirked. Neither did you. I turned to the board. Now let's discuss dissolving this homeowner association. And just like that, Karen's dictatorship was over. Karen wasn't the type to surrender without resistance. She had spent years ruling the homeowner association like her private empire, and she wasn't going to let some nobody, as she still deceived herself into believing, I was take everything from her without a counter-strike. The moment she was dismissed as homeowner association president, I anticipated retaliation. What I didn't foresee was just how underhanded she was prepared to get. Karen's last stand begins the very next morning. I woke up to find a fresh homeowner association violation notice pinned to my door. Apparently, I had breached 7 new policies overnight. My house disrupted the architectural uniformity of the neighborhood. My vehicle was an unapproved model for the community. My shrubs were 1.5 inches too tall. My mailbox was aligned at an incorrect angle. Each of these violations came with a massive penalty. Total amount $75,000. I laughed. This was Karen's method of attempting to weaponize the homeowner association against me. One final time, Karen forms a shadow homeowner association. Karen wasn't just bombarding me with fabricated fines, she was actively plotting to regain her power. She began gathering a group of devoted homeowner association supporters, persuading them that the board meeting was invalid and that she was still the rightful homeowner association president. Word spread that she was assembling an unofficial homeowner association council. They started patrolling the neighborhood, issuing fraudulent violation notices and intimidating residents. Some of them even attempted to blockade my driveway with their vehicles, asserting I was trespassing on my own property. The harassment strategies didn't stop there. The fraudulent lawsuit tactic. When the penalties and intimidation strategies didn't work, Karen took her next desperate measure. She filed a lawsuit against me. She alleged I had unlawfully obtained properties through deception, pressured the homeowner association board into voting against her, breached contractual responsibilities as a homeowner. Her objective to drag me into a legal confrontation and exhaust me financially. She even started spreading accusations that I was a fraudster hoping to turn the neighborhood against me. What she didn't anticipate was who she was actually challenging. The media steps in. Karen made a massive mistake by going public with her lies. She attempted to portray herself as a victim of an aggressive corporate takeover. She gave an interview to a local news station, sobbing about how I had seized the neighborhood from her and how she was merely trying to safeguard the community. That was the chance I required. I made a few calls. Within 48 hours, every major media platform had the actual story. The headlines: Homeowner Association President accused of extortion and deception. Corrupt Homeowner Association scheme uncovered. Homeowners penalized into foreclosure. Real estate investor exposes homeowner association fraud. Ex-board president under investigation. When the news broke, Karen panicked. She tried refuting everything, but with all the financial reports, witness testimonies, and legal documentation I had collected, she had no defense. Even residents who had once been frightened of her began stepping forward, sharing their horrifying experiences. Karen had lost command of the narrative. The homeowner association board members start defecting. Seeing the inevitable outcome, Karen's former board members started turning on her. Ted, the treasurer, publicly admitted how Karen had manipulated homeowner association funds. 2 other board members confessed to authorizing unlawful foreclosures under her directives. Residents testified that she had intimidated them with legal threats if they spoke out. At this stage, even the local authorities were getting involved. Karen's previous financial transactions were being scrutinized for fraud misappropriation. And even racketeering, she had fallen from ruler of the homeowner association to a disgraced swindler under legal investigation, but she still wasn't finished. Karen's final desperate act, a personal attack. When Karen realized she was running out of alternatives, she attempted to target me directly. Late one night, someone slashed the tires on my vehicle. A few days later, my security cameras recorded a couple of her homeowner association loyalists dumping trash on my lawn. Then a false allegation was filed against me with the city, claiming I was operating an unauthorized business out of my house. It was a desperate ploy to intimidate me, but I had one last move left: the ultimate power play. The homeowner association is abolished. I called another urgent board meeting, this time with the entire neighborhood present, with the majority of homeowners on my side, and Karen, effectively stripped of authority, executed my final move. I'm proposing a vote to dismantle the homeowner association. The audience erupted in cheers. One by one, the residents voted yes. Karen's greatest weapon, the homeowner association, was completely eradicated. No more penalties, no more absurd policies, no more. Karen, with that decision, Karen officially lost everything. She had no authority, no influence, nothing, and she understood it. As I exited the meeting, she sat in the back of the room trembling with rage, comprehending that her reign of oppression was truly finished. But the best part, I wasn't done with her yet. Karen had lost everything. The homeowner association was officially terminated, her power shattered, and her reputation completely ruined. But I wasn't done with her yet. She had spent years tormenting homeowners, defrauding them, and forcing individuals out of their own residences. I wasn't about to let her escape without facing genuine repercussions. The moment the vote to dissolve the homeowner association passed, I saw it in her eyes, sheer panic. She sat motionless in the back of the room, gripping the edge of her chair as reality came crashing down on her. No more homeowner association meant no more dominance, no more penalties, no more foreclosure schemes, and worst of all, no more effortless money. Karen attempts to recover. The next day, Karen made a miserable attempt to claw her way back. She went door to door pleading with people to reconsider the homeowner association decision, trying to persuade them that I had deceived them into surrendering valuable community safeguards. The issue: nobody trusted her anymore. The residents she had tormented for years laughed in her face. One homeowner, a retired Navy officer named Mr. Dawson, didn't even let her complete her speech. "You're the reason I almost lost my property," he growled, slamming the door in her face. Another neighbor, a single mother Karen, had fined over $10,000 for unauthorized seasonal decorations, looked her directly in the eyes and said, "I hope you lose everything." Karen's desperation was evident. With the homeowner association gone, she had no steady revenue, her racket was finished, and that's when I decided to conclude what I initiated. The lawsuits commence. Karen's downfall wasn't just about losing power, she had committed actual crimes, and I was going to ensure she faced the penalties. First, I filed a lawsuit against her individually. The funds she stole, I had documented proof. The fraudulent foreclosures exposed. The fabricated penalties recorded. Second, I handed over all my evidence to the district prosecutor. Karen had misappropriated homeowner association finances for years. She had engaged in fraud by falsifying financial statements. She had leveraged her authority to personally profit from foreclosures. The moment the legal charges were filed, she completely collapsed. Karen loses everything. Within a month, Karen was served with multiple lawsuits. Her bank assets were frozen. Her house, one of the properties she had unlawfully acquired, was confiscated by the state. And worst of all, she was arrested. The day it occurred, I made sure to be present. I stood on my front porch watching as two police officers escorted her out of her home in restraints. The once dominant homeowner association dictator was now a disgraced felon. She saw me standing there, and for a fleeting moment, her face contorted with rage. "This is your doing?" she screamed. "You destroyed everything." I simply smiled. "No, Karen, you did that all by yourself." She was shoved into the back of the police car, her face displayed all over the news that night. Karen Thompson, former homeowner association President arrested for fraud and embezzlement. It was poetic justice. Residents finally received justice. With Karen gone, the neighborhood changed overnight. The absurd penalties were abolished. Homeowners who had been wrongfully fined got their refunds. The properties she stole were returned to their lawful owners. And as for the homeowner association, it never returned. Instead, I collaborated with the community to create a new system, one that genuinely benefited homeowners instead of exploiting them. No unnecessary policies. No exploitation of authority. No Karen. Just neighbors enjoying their lives in harmony. The final strike, months later, received one last update about Karen. After being convicted of fraud, she was ordered to reimburse every stolen dollar. Since she had no assets left, she was compelled to declare bankruptcy. Her reputation was destroyed. No one wanted to employ her. No one wanted to lease to her. No one wanted any association with her. The woman who had once ruled the neighborhood like a monarch was now bankrupt, disgraced, and powerless. I heard she ended up renting a tiny apartment in a deteriorating part of town. No gated community, no homeowner association control, no wealth. Just a bitter, fallen frog who had ultimately received what she deserved. And I remained in the neighborhood, relishing my peaceful homeowner association free life. Every time I walked past Karen's now deserted house, I couldn't help but grin, because in the end the tyrant always falls. Karen was gone. The homeowner association was abolished. The neighborhood was finally free. But my mission wasn't complete yet. I didn't just want to win, I wanted to guarantee something like this never happened again. I had already dismantled Karen's empire, exposed her deception, and ensured she faced real penalties. Now it was time for the final revelation: Karen's disgraceful departure. The day after Karen's sentencing, a moving truck arrived in front of her former house. It wasn't for her. She had been forced to sell everything to settle her legal expenses. She was officially destitute. I happened to be outside when she appeared, a shattered remnant of the tyrant she once was. Her eyes, once filled with smug superiority, were now empty and hopeless. She didn't say anything as she observed strangers settling into what was once her domain. She just stood there clutching a cheap suitcase, staring at the place she once ruled with an iron grip. Then finally, she turned to me. "You took everything from me," she whispered, her voice trembling with anger. I met her gaze, completely composed. "No, Karen, you did that to yourself." She parted her lips to protest, but no words emerged. She knew I was right. Without another word, she walked away, vanishing down the street. A nobody in a world where she once assumed she was invincible. Alex's true identity uncovered. Up until now, I had maintained a low profile. Most people in the neighborhood had no clue who I truly was. But after everything that happened, the truth started spreading. One evening at a neighborhood cookout, a group of residents approached me. "Alex, we heard a rumor." One of them said, "Is it true that you own like half the city?" I chuckled. "Not exactly, but close," the crowd murmured in astonishment. "I looked you up," another neighbor admitted. "You're on Forbes' real estate magnate list. I thought you were just some guy moving into the neighborhood." Someone else added. I shrugged. "I am. I just happen to have the influence to dismantle a corrupt homeowner association." They stared at me for a long moment before breaking into applause. "You rescued this neighborhood. You actually took down Karen. I can't believe we were living under a scam for so long." I smiled. "Well, you never have to worry about anything like that again." That night, we celebrated. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid of being penalized for yard decorations or mailbox styles. They were just living. And that was exactly what I wanted. A new homeowner association free haven. With the homeowner association gone, ensured the neighborhood remained protected. I helped the residents establish a simple, non-intrusive neighborhood association. One that genuinely worked for homeowners, not against them. No unjust fines. No authoritarian leadership. Just a community where people cared for each other. I even financed a few improvements. A new community park, security cameras for protection, and a neighborhood watch initiative, all without forcing anyone to pay outrageous fees or follow Karen-style dictatorship rules. For the first time in a long time, The neighborhood was genuinely a pleasant place to live. Karen's last known situation. Months later, I received one final update about Karen. Apparently she was moving between rundown motels, struggling to secure employment. No one in real estate or homeowner association management would hire her. Her fraud conviction had permanently blacklisted her from any authoritative role. And her former homeowner association allies, they had all severed ties with her, pretending they were never involved. Karen had gone from queen of the neighborhood to a disgraced outcast, living paycheck to paycheck. The last I heard, she was working as a receptionist in a dilapidated property management office. A fitting conclusion for a woman who once believed she was untouchable. As I sat on my porch watching the sunset over my now tranquil homeowner association-free neighborhood, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had transpired. One power-hungry woman had tried to control people through fear. She thought she could intimidate, exploit, and defraud her way to the top. But in the end, she lost everything. Because when you push people too far, when you exploit your authority for too long, eventually consequences catch up. And I made sure Karen received exactly what she deserved. What do you think? Should homeowner associations have this much control? Have you ever encountered a Karen-like homeowner association president? Let me know in the comments below. And if you appreciated this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unbelievable real estate conflicts.